This is Kim Meyer, host of Choose to Rise. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Welcome to the Leadership Revolution podcast. We want to take a moment and say how happy and honoured we are that you have chosen to take time out of your week to join us today. We're excited to have you with us. If this is your first time listening, our vision is to build healthier families and communities through education and leadership, which begins by leading ourselves from the heart. We invite you to be fully present as you listen and judge later, because it's not easy to do both at the same time. So sit back, relax and enjoy.
Hi, my friends. I am David, your host of the Leadership Revolution, and I have the privilege to serve you every other week as your guide. I'm excited because we're having a conversation with Naomi. And now, introduce yourself a little bit about who you are, what you're about, so our listeners can learn more about you.
Sure. So my name is Naomi Trentham. I am, as you can tell from my accent, from the UK. I am primarily a mum to three amazing kids who are 14, 11 and 8, who consume a lot of my energy but are a privilege to raise. Second to that, I founded an organisation beginning of the year called Mitos, which stands for Moving in the Opposite Spirit. And Mitos, I wasn't really sure what it was about or what it was for. I thought it was going to be kind of a business for my work, which is emotional engagement. I am an emotion coach, mentor and practitioner trainer, so I train teachers and frontline staff in various organisations, but it's moved quite a lot in the last few months. It's sort of shifted and the team has grown, and it's really more an umbrella for under which collaborations and projects can happen. So there's all kinds of things going on there, including leadership and identity courses for sixth formers. So that for us is 16 to 18 year olds in schools, as well as work around education system and all kinds of things actually. And I also do one-to-one coaching with adults and children. So that's what I do. Overshadowing all of that really is I'm a lover of Jesus. I love Jesus. I love people. He is my driver. He is my why. And a big part of why emotional engagement is so important to me is because he stopped, every person he encountered, he stopped to check in and actually meet their emotional need first before calling them to change or to repent, or even before healing them. He would see them and let them know they were valid and loved before anything else. So that's me in a nutshell.
Well said. You and I agree on lover of Jesus, because without him, we wouldn't have this opportunity. But more importantly, he shows us an example. And then you talked about being an emotional coach and helping the youth as well as adults. So speaking about emotions, right? And you talked about identity, and I want to talk about that as well. But speaking about emotions, there's COVID, right? And everyone is experiences all at the same time. What are some emotions that you've experienced while going through this pandemic with COVID and so many other things?
That is a great question. My first I would say my primary set of emotions right at the beginning were, I was really skeptical about it, to be honest. I thought it was all a bit of a fuss. But when I realised I was going to be locked down in my home with three children by myself for 12 weeks, I flipped my lid. So, which basically means my emotions started shouting a lot louder than my reason. There was no voice of reason, and I just panicked. And I would say in that time, and I didn't feel afraid of the virus. I didn't feel afraid of anything other than not seeing another human being, not getting hugged, not having adult conversation. So panic, fear, I was overwhelmed. It didn't last long after I, was what I describe as emotionally sick over my entire family, my extended family. But actually kind of talking it out, praying it out, and I'm one of those people that very quickly makes the most of situations. So I regulated fairly well, and have actually found incredible joy in the midst of the challenges.
Wow. That's interesting. For me, like going through that experience, it reminded me of like hurricanes down in Florida, right? Where everyone's getting toilet paper, they're getting all the food and necessities they need, and then we would shut down for like a month. So like I was like, okay, the world is experiencing what Floridians experience every single year.
Right.
And like you, I thought it was a fuss, and then I started hearing more and more stories about it, and then I started getting nervous, like, okay, like I have to protect my family. And my wife Audrey, she thought she wasn't afraid of anything. So she would go in the stores and touch things and then touch her face. I was like, no, get your hands off your face, like trying to have everyone wear gloves. And it's just like, come on, like, and she's like, I'm not afraid of it. I'm not afraid of it. And I was just like, but now I would say there's so much beauty as a result of it, like time alone, time to think, time to create. Now, talking about emotions, the question is like, where do we go from here, right? 2020 started in a way that it was promising, like 2020 vision,
Yeah. I was thinking that exact same thing today, and I was thinking, actually, I think we thought, 2020 vision, everything's going to come good this year, and then this massive disruption happened. But actually, I think that's exactly what has happened. The world has had to stop and take stock, and now we're seeing things the way we couldn't have seen them before. I think it has brought our vision into alignment. Not completely, and I know for some people it's been really like re-experiencing trauma, very painful, very difficult. But globally, I think it's done that. It's like, well, actually, just thinking about the Black Lives Matters movement, would we have been able to see and respond if COVID hadn't been happening? Everyone's on their phones. Everyone begins to listen. They're beginning to see. They're beginning to understand. And one friend of mine, he's from Ghana, and he was saying, well, people are identifying with what we've gone through because their autonomy has been taken away, just like ours was. So we haven't been free to express what we need. Suddenly everybody's experiencing that lack of freedom. So they're beginning to identify with that emotion.
I didn't even look at it that way. That's interesting you say it, because oftentimes when we think clear vision, we think the end product. But how you explain it is clear vision is able to see the need of change that we were once blinded by, or we were distracted by. And 2020 clearer vision is, okay, this is the problems that we're having. What do we do now? And where do we go from here? And that's the name of the show in this series. Where do we go from here? So my question to you is like, what are your thoughts on how we can move forward in a healthy way as a result of what we've experienced?
Well, I think, it's interesting because I say early on in lockdown, it feels like everything was early on in lockdown, but some point in the first few weeks, I really felt to just write like a bit of an article, a statement about what it was going to look like to come back together into group environments in the aftermath of COVID-19. And I put it on LinkedIn. It was kind of a bit of a stepping out the boat moment for me. Like, I'm just going to brave this and put out what I'm carrying, and got a bit of response. It was good. It's led to other things, which is brilliant. But one of the things I talked about was the melting pot of emotions. So for me, my whole family, we re-experienced the emotions we had when the kid's dad left. So when he moved out, suddenly we're in a situation where a lot of choices got taken away, and I am responsible for navigating my 3 kids and myself through a painful, difficult change. And so what it did is it re-awoke those same emotions. We were all triggered all over the place. It was like, what the heck is going on? And so because emotions are essentially memories, the reason we remember specific events so vividly is because of the emotional experience. So trauma, for example, is not what happened, it's the emotional response. So for some people, so if you've got somebody who has experienced a lot of abandonment and being left alone a lot as a kid, who then has to suddenly, used to being in a busy working environment, suddenly work alone, or self-isolate because they're shielding, because they've got health issues, they're going to re-experience the trauma of being abandoned if that hasn't been processed and dealt with in therapy or whatever. And then you think of the kids who have suddenly been put in a situation where they have to do all of their schoolwork at home, and the parents, particularly if they're anxious parents who are worried about what their kids are missing, are putting all the pressure on to get their homework done. You fast forward 6 months, 8 months down the line, and that kid has homework. They're going to re-experience that same animosity, fury, frustration towards their parents. So when we re-experience emotion, or when we experience something, it can reawaken the pain of the past. And so that's all okay. But if you bring that into a classroom environment, where you've got a teacher who may have had a partner who was extremely vulnerable, maybe had health conditions, so they had literally been stuck inside for 3 months. She had been terrified of catching the virus, and going back into school is extremely anxiety inducing. And then within the school classroom, you might have kids that have lost a loved one, kids that have been in the care system who have now been shipped to another family, kids who are autistic and like routine, and it's all changing, kids who their primary need is physical touch, and now they can't have physical touch. Kids are having where their autonomy is taken away, and they've all experienced stuff before, so they're coming into an environment. If nobody talks about how weird this is, or we've just got to get on with our learning, we've got to catch up with all our maths and our science, then you're going to have literally 30 people being triggered all at once, and it's going to lead to a mental health crisis. So for me, the messages that we're putting out in our organization, things that we're trying to say to people, is even just saying to the room, this is really weird, we've all found it really hard. Hey, what was weird for you? What was weird for you? Do you know what I experienced? Like what it was like, having to be on my own as a kid. I felt really alone again when I was at home working. Even just naming those things enables us in our emotions to regulate, feel understood, and then we can manage, we become resilient. But if you don't have that, and then and that's an environment where you would expect there to be emotional language. You take that into a corporate office room, a room full of people in a corporate environment, you are just asking for breakdown in relationships. And so everyone's talking about mental health. We need to be making sure everybody's mental health is in check. Got to talk about feelings.
Yeah.
So it's really fascinating for me. Obviously, I set up my organization in January. We're now in August. I am massively busy because people are going, why am I feeling all this stuff? I need to know why I'm feeling this. So it's getting behind the why of, why we're experiencing what we are. So for me, to see progress and to see change, is to get in touch with our feelings and talk about it.
Wow, that was powerful. I didn't even think of it that way. You said we're going to experience all of these mental issues as a result of not getting those emotional needs met, and we get those emotional needs met differently. Some is touch, affirmation, hugs, all of those things. And when we talk about our emotions, our feelings, then it can help lead us in a better way. So now you're getting all these calls, you're busy, you're having your own emotions, you're leading 3 kids, you're now the shepherd of the family. So how have you found healthy ways to deal with your emotions? Because there's 2 ways to deal with them. How have you found healthier ways to deal with them?
What do you think of the 2 ways?
It's unhealthy and healthy.
Okay.
Yeah. Left and right.
Or not at all, which is the unhealthiest.
Yeah.
So that's the unhealthy end, but it's like a lot of people just suppress, which doesn't work in the long term at all. How have I dealt with it? So I've had meltdowns. I've absolutely lost the plot. My poor brother can testify to that fact, because he got the angry call the day that I went absolutely crazy. And I think that's okay to actually go, this is really sucky and I'm feeling all this stuff, and letting it out is really good. How have I managed my emotions? A lot of time with God, if I'm honest. And that's not like, I'm not talking reading masses of scripture. I'm talking like going for like running. I took up running, which was a bit of a shock to anyone that knows me. And I would just like asking questions like, God, how do I do today? Or what about this? Or what about that? And I get, as you know, like just downloads. He spoke to me so much, just really unlocking a lot in me, which was really good. And journaling. I journal a lot, like nearly every day. I would just write out what I'm feeling, what's going on for me, what do I need, trying to identify what I need. And that's the power of emotion. That's why emotions are so powerful, because they tell us what we need. Mm-hmm. So we think of emotions as secondary to logic, like, well, it needs to make sense. But actually, it's the emotional part of the brain that's fully active by the age of 11, which is before any other part. The thinking brain is another 20 years or so. But and so it tells us what we need. So if I'm feeling really like interesting today, I drove across town. I live in a city that was not designed for modern traffic, and there's a lot of narrow roads. There's also a lot of roadworks going on, and I hate it. I love this city. I love living here. I hate driving here, but we don't have public transport. And I had a meeting, had a client, and I'm driving, and I can feel the rage begin to emerge in me. And it was like, wow, I'm really angry right now. I mean, I was on the horn at one point, like literally honking, get a move on. And it's like, okay, why am I so angry? What's going on in me? And I realized I was actually angry at myself, because I'd scheduled a 4:00 session, which had been pushed back to 4:30 by the client. Then I had another, so that was going to take me to 5:30. And the traffic was telling me that to get home was going to take longer than I anticipated. And I had another call at 6.
Wow.
It was going to last till 7. And then you and I were scheduled to talk at 8. And that gave me a 1-hour window, if it all ran on time, to feed my kids and put one of them to bed. So I was feeling my time being squeezed, but also I was mad at myself for not anticipating how long everything was going to take. And so it's like, okay, I need this to be eased. I need to feel peaceful. I need to be in a good headspace when I walk into this meeting. What can I do? So it's like, what do I need? What do I feel? I feel angry and frustrated. What do I need? I need to ease things up. I need to feel safe. What can I do about it? So as soon as I got to my client, and I prayed, I was like, God, parking is a nightmare here. And I managed to get a parking spot opposite her flat, her apartment, which never happens. Mm-hmm. And as I walked up to her apartment, I sent a message to my next client, pushing him back by 15 minutes. And then and I said to him, and basically I ended up having a shorter session with him, which gave me the time I needed. So that's a really practical thing. Yeah. But actually they tell us what we need. And because of how our physical bodies are linked with our emotions and the emotional part of our brain, even there was a few weeks ago I was out walking and I was like, I need a hug. I really need a hug. Why do I need a hug? I know I haven't been hugged in a while by an adult, but why do I need a hug so badly? Like I was crying. I needed a hug so much. And I was like, what is that? So I need a hug. Why do I need a hug? I need a hug because I need to feel comfort. Why do I need to feel comfort? Where's the pain? And so I was able to track it to a pocket of grief from my marriage ending. It was a kind of a particular pocket of grief that I hadn't yet visited. It was like just identifying that loss, going, actually that was really painful. Actually, I really missed that. That's a loss to me. I was able to then let it go, and then I didn't need a hug anymore. So that's why emotions are so valid, because they tell us what we need. Yeah. And it's really not rocket science. But people are afraid. people are afraid they feel vulnerable when we talk about feelings.
Yeah, and since we're talking about feelings, I appreciate your level of vulnerability in sharing how you initially felt and experienced this trauma and COVID with everything going on, and how you eloquently said that our emotion tells us what we need. And literally before we did this recording, talking about where do we go from here, I felt like a series of emotion, and you were just like, no, we're gonna press in it. And you said, how are you feeling? What's going on? Ask the Holy Spirit, how are you feeling? And I felt overwhelmed. So speaking about it and just releasing it, there's so much power, and now I can think a little bit more clearly. Now, so as we like continue, we're in August, you know, this has been going on like February or March. Like, where do we go from here? Do we have more of these conversations of let's talk about emotions? And then after we talk about emotions, what do we do then? What are your thoughts?
What are my thoughts? I think it's because there's so many scales, isn't there? There's these scales. Like, you know, if it wasn't for COVID, you and I wouldn't have been having the conversation. Like, we wouldn't have met.
That is true.
So, and it's that like, so I think there's kind of that amazing opportunity to reflect and how important that is, to really stop and reflect and look at the good that's happened. Mm-hmm. I think Jason Mraz released a song during lockdown called "Look for the Good," and it's just like it's kind of a good, let's look for what we need, look for what makes us happy, look for. I think it caused a lot of people to stop and go, well, do I enjoy what I do? What do I want to do? Do I even want to do this anymore? And so I think there's that kind of the kind of personal relationships and the stock taking in our personal lives. And then there's like the bigger picture, like how does this work nationally? I mean, the fear was interesting. I was in London a week before last with my kids to stay for a few days with a friend, and there were moments of being on the subway and being in the city where you could feel the fear. What if someone coughs on me? What if I get COVID? What if I die? And I'm like, I really hate this. And Mytos, moving in the opposite spirit, that spirit is fear. Everything we're doing is about coming against that with love in whatever form that needs to take. But I think my it's not a fear. I think I'm aware of how comfortable we can become with things that aren't good. So I was suddenly aware. I just came back from my sister's yesterday. I flew back down from the north, and today I went supermarket shopping. And last week, grocery shopping last week or week before, they made it compulsory to wear face masks in grocery stores here, or in all stores. And it occurred to me today how wearing a face mask now feels normal. Mm-hmm. How seeing other people in them feels normal. And I hate that, because like the person, I quite like this. I bought some wine and the cashier came over to check my age, and she looked at me really closely because she could only see my eyes. So I don't know whether what I did say, I was like, I don't know whether it's just that my eyes look young or she couldn't see, or that the age is shown in the lower half of my face. But I'm definitely over 21. But it was
That's
by a long way.
That's good to know.
But it was, and I just thought, this is really sad.
Yeah.
How quickly a directive from the government, which by the way we can very easily opt out of if we want to, is causing, it's like we're becoming familiar with fear. We're becoming familiar with, it's like it's sending a message, wearing these face masks, there's something to be afraid of, something to be afraid of. And so I think one of the things we need is to be on our guard, to be aware. What are the messages that we're hearing from government? Do they ring true? Do they cause me to feel safe, or do they cause me to feel fear? Do they cause me to feel like, you know, I realized that one of the reasons I was wearing face masks in shops when I could refuse is because I didn't want to cause the shop assistant to get into trouble, or to feel bad, or to feel like they had to tell me off. Yeah. So suddenly I am compromising my conviction that I shouldn't be wearing one. I felt like I was joining in with something that wasn't good, in order to placate someone else. And that's not how I roll normally.
Yeah.
So I'm moving my personal boundaries to a government directive that is questionable in actually whether it's proven to make a difference.
Yeah, like just even in this call, I was holding back a cough. So like if you cough, you sneeze, it's like everyone is what happened, what I think Audrey said as well, like we're so quick to get programmed, and this moment has shown like and it goes back to school, right? You know, school teaches us to fall in line, to do what the status quo is doing, and to not question authority. And now we're seeing it in our lives now, where we're, you know, enforced to do this, and people are like, this is, you know, the new norm. And for those who don't wear masks, how we're programmed to look at them like, oh, you're not following the rules. It goes back to the education at its earliest stages, like, hey, you're not following line. I'm going to tell the teacher, and this person's a bad person. And now we're labeling people and fostering even more of that fear. So hearing you say that is, wow, we're quick to get programmed.
We really are. It's that don't think for yourself. Don't even think for yourself. Do what you're told. And the irony is that, I mean, on our government website, this really made me laugh. I was with my parents a couple of weeks back, and they've been very relaxed about this whole thing. And you look at the government, on our government website, there's like literally all the rules around wearing face masks. And then at the bottom are PDFs that you can print out to exempt yourself from wearing a mask. On the same page. So you can say, no, I'm not wearing a mask because I feel anxious. It could be that simple. And so, but you're right, we do. It's kind of, it's reinforcing that, judging people by how they look. And also, you know, whereas what if that person has a learning difficulty, or a sensory issue, or autism, or something else? But the other thing that makes me feel, that really concerns me, talking about school, is all these babies and infants are growing up with not having the opportunity to read facial expressions.
So on that note, we're going to pause because we're going to have another episode just on facial expression and nonverbal cues, and how that is going to it's going to interrupt communication and how we connect with others. So Naomi, thank you again for being on this, and we're going to have a part 2, and we're going to talk specifically about that. Say that again.
Okay. I said, it's my pleasure.
Yeah. And if people want to connect with you, how would they do that? How could they?
The best way is to go to my website, our website, the organization, which is www.mitos.work.
Awesome. And are you on social media as well?
Mitos.work on Instagram, and we have a Mitos.work page on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Phenomenal. Again, next time we're going to be talking about nonverbal and children not having the luxury and the opportunity to read people's facial expressions. And my encouragement for you today is to reflect. Why are you feeling what you're feeling? And then after you reflect, acknowledge what you're feeling and experience that. And then after that, take action. What path are you willing to take? With that being said, let's close out in prayer. Dear Dad, I want to thank you for what we got to hear today. Let it penetrate our hearts and our mind. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May he make his face shine upon you. May he be gracious towards you. May he give you strength when you're weak, hope when you're discouraged, faith to believe, and joy that is contagious, in Jesus' mighty name. Y'all, thank you again for joining today. Come back every other Wednesday for each month. I've been doing this so long and I'm still messing this up. Every other Wednesday. And thank you again, Naomi, for being on today's episode.
You're welcome.
Awesome. So I want you to remember something. If we as leaders are to set ourselves apart, we must start by leading through love, which always comes from the heart.
Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of the Leadership Revolution podcast. We hope you were blessed. We value feedback from our listeners, so please leave a comment letting us know what you found helpful, challenging, or left you wanting to know more. New Leadership Revolution messages will be released every other Wednesday. Hit subscribe to be sure not to miss out. To stay in the know on our latest news, events and initiatives, follow Shepherd Revolution on Instagram, TikTok and Facebook. Thank you again for coming on this journey with us. We love you, and as you go about the rest of your day, we bless you to lead from your heart.